Hey, gang, in the midst of all this economic insanity, let me ask you, how much money do you think you could save if you were able to pay off your mortgage in 5 to 7 years without any change in your current income? I mean, think about that. Pretty impressive, huh? We're going to find out, actually, how much you could be saving with our guest today. He's going to show you how you can do that and more. If you're a fan of this channel, then you're going to know Michael Lush. He's been with us several times. He's a patriot that's not only revolutionizing the mortgage industry, but he's also an expert on building a parallel economy dedicated to faith, family, and freedom. Michael Lush of Replace Your Mortgage is with us today to show you how you can pay off your mortgage in as little as 5 to 7 years, as well as plug you into a host of all kinds of other things he's doing to build a parallel poly. So, Michael, welcome back. Good to see you again, my friend.
Yeah, good to be here. Thanks for having me once again. It's funny, just on the heels of this interview, I was watching a couple Facebook videos of some buddies that are in the mortgage industry. And it's funny because now that mortgage rates are skyrocketing or have already skyrocketed, they're now parlaying. It's like, where can we get clients from? We already refinanced these people a year or two ago into 2.75% interest rates. And now what do we do with our 7.5%? There's nothing we could do. So they're getting creative. And now they're starting to solicit clients for what's called an all-in-one, a home equity line of credit. And I'm thinking, where were you 2 years ago? And now they're touting, this is the best thing. This is way better than a mortgage. This is all we will ever have with our family is an all-in-one loan. And it's like, why you weren't touting that last year and the year before when you're cashing these huge commission checks by refinancing people into 2.5% mortgage rates. So now it's become popular, right? I can't complain. It's great. More people need to wake up to it. Unfortunately, we had to have skyrocketing mortgage rates in order for people to realize that there's a lot of validity behind what we talk about.
Yeah, let's dive in there. By the way, I'm going to be out there in Nashville in a couple of weeks, so we got to get together.
I'll be here.
Yeah, awesome. So I want to dive into that a little bit because for those who are not familiar with you, give us a little bit of the backstory of how you changed your whole thinking about mortgages and rediscovered, we talk about re-traditionalization all the time on this channel, more and more populations going back to the way we used to do things before these kind of crazy modernist globalist sort of stuff. Tell us about how you changed your whole thing about mortgages and rediscovered a more traditionalist way of owning a home.
Yeah. So again, we're going back in history of this is how Americans used to finance real estate. And it wasn't called a home equity line of credit back then. It was called a mortgage. But a mortgage had very different components than it does today. A mortgage was an open-end loan, meaning money can move in and out freely, pretty much 24/7. Not quite like today's home equity line of credit, but it was liquid. So back then, Americans were storing their cash and reserves in their mortgage because it was semi-liquid. They could go down to the bank the same day and say, hey, I've got lots of equity in my property. Can you rewrite the deed and give me 10 grand for farm equipment? I go sell crop and I could dump in 20 grand. That generation was paying their homes off in 5-10 years. So we hear all the time. So stories of our grandfathers and great grandfathers back in my day, we paid our homes off in 5 to 10 years. They were a better generation, but number one, they had better financing tools than what we think we have available today. So what changed all that was in 1913, the formation of the Federal Reserve.
Right.
Well, it wasn't the first formation. It was the last one that succeeded, right? So in 1913, the Federal Reserve comes along, institutes what's called fractional reserve lending. Now these banks and mortgage lenders get on board and say, hold up. Now that we have this magic tool called fractional reserve lending, we need consumers to put more of their money in our coffers, in our checking and savings accounts. And that's when they made a mortgage closed-end product where money could only move in freely and not out freely. So it became closed in. Excuse me, coming off of the flu, so it may cough every now and then. And what that does is it segregates your income. So it makes the average consumer far less efficient with paying off their debts than they otherwise would be. So when you talk about how do we get back to the traditional way of doing things, that's what a HELOC is. A HELOC is a simple interest open-end line of credit. So you can treat it just like your checking account. We look at what inflation is today. I was doing an article for another entity 2 weeks ago, and I was doing some research on what the savings rate has been. Now the interest rates have crept up. Now, crept up is a bit conservative, right?
Yeah,
it's
right.
skyrocketed. So you would, by nature, think that, okay, well, now our savings rates are actually going up as well. They're not. So back in 2019, you were getting 0.22% on your savings account. So still extremely low and terrible rate of return. Now you look, the average rate of return for a checking and savings account is 0.13. So it's actually gone down. Even though rates have gone up, the savings rate return has actually gone down. So it's just a very inefficient way of doing it. So why would we even participate in the banking system by putting our savings and checking and all that into these funds that are getting us a much lower rate of return than the cost of inflation, when we can actually deposit those funds into our debt and still remain liquid, which suppresses the balance and suppresses the interest that you pay. When you do that, you speed up the payoff time frame to, like you said, almost 5 to 7 years on average for our clients. Some are faster, some are slower, but 5 to 7 years. So what you'll see is that by paying it off in 5 to 7 years versus a 30-year mortgage, you're paying a fraction of the interest you otherwise would be. But the key is liquidity. So you're staying 100% liquid. So although if you paid off a mortgage now, especially in this economy, if you're an employee of Twitter, you just got laid off and you paid off your mortgage, well, you don't have access to liquidity, right?
Right.
Well, in a home equity line of credit, you could pay it off, but still maintain 100% liquidity. So you're that Twitter employee that just got laid off by Elon Musk. Voila, I've got access to income should I need it during this time until I switch teams here and move over to Facebook or TikTok or whatever you plan on doing.
Wow. And gang, just so you know, too, we've got Michael's hosting a free webinar on precisely how you can revolutionize the way you're paying your home off and then some. So click on the link below to sign up. I'll be learning right there along with you. I'll be at that webinar as well. Yeah, this is interesting. So here's a question for you. So you mentioned the rising interest rates there. So how does a HELOC square with the Fed raising interest rates? Does it still make sense to get a HELOC, or how does it fit in that? Yeah,
surprisingly, it does. Now, there are different strategies to implement depending on your financial situation. So if you are somebody that is massively cash flow positive, what I mean by that is, let's say you're bringing in $10,000 a month, but you're only spending $4,000 a month on expenses, right? You've got a good margin there between what's coming in and what's going out. You could flip everything to what's called a first lien position home equity line of credit. And even if that interest rate was higher, and I'll show you a different strategy here in a second of how you could actually get a lower rate. But even if the interest rate itself is higher, keep in mind, interest rate only dictates the payment on that debt. It doesn't necessarily dictate how much interest you pay. What dictates how much interest you pay is time and balance. So if you're attacking that and you're treating it just like a checking account, you're attacking balance very aggressively with your cash flow positivity. So you are actually what's called interest rate immune. So in my specific situation, I would rather have a 9% home equity line of credit than a 3% mortgage, because I'm able to put all of my reserves in there, all of my income. It can store all of my assets into that home equity line of credit. So I suppress the balance very quickly and I pay it down very quickly. Therefore, the amount of interest I pay is negligible in compared to the rising interest rates. Now, another form is, all right, let's say you want to baby step into this. I got a 2.5% mortgage 2 years ago, and I just don't want to give that up. It's the holy grail, right? It's the lowest rates have ever been, and probably ever, I would say ever will be, but will be for a very long time. And you're just nervous about this concept. And again, on this webinar that we're going to talk about, I will get into the mathematical details of this, why you should not be afraid of interest rates. But let's just say you wanted to. You could always get a home equity line of credit on top of your existing mortgage, because that's what a lot of folks are facing right now. Real estate prices are still trending up for the most part. I mean, there are some cities where values are going to start to dip a little bit because of the rise of interest rates and the lower demand now. But you've got trapped equity there. You're like, okay, I don't want to give up this 2.5%, but I've got equity here that I could utilize for other investments to pay off some additional debts, maybe start a side hustle or a business. So how do I tap into that equity without disrupting that low rate mortgage? You could get a home equity line of credit in second lien position. And we have a strategy that will show people how you can take that second lien position home equity line of credit on a variable rate and chunk towards that first lien position mortgage and start evaporating the balance of it. Problem is, you still have segregation of income and you have a little bit more risk than you would if you did a first lien position HELOC, because when you go to the bank and you say, hey, I want to get a loan and my real estate is collateral, but you're not going to be in first lien position. So if anything were to hit the fan, there's no guarantee that you're getting your money back. So that's the issue with second lien position, is you do put the bank at more risk. When you put the bank at more risk, you put yourself at more risk, right? Now, here's the cool thing, that this happened in 2018. This happened back in 2009. When rates spike, banks have to get creative to get customers to still walk in the front door. So a lot of these banks that offer these HELOCs are now coming out with what's called promo rates. So we've seen 0.99 for 6 months. Actually, I saw one for 0% for 6 months. 0%, a true 0%, not 0.99. It was actually 0% for 6 months. 1.99 for 12 months, 2.99 for 2 years. We found one that was 5 years at 3.25%. And again, this is on a home equity line of credit. So yes, rates have spiked, but I don't think there's any doubt that towards the latter half of 2023, the Fed is going to have to reverse course. You know, really what they're doing is they're driving interest rates up so high that it creates higher unemployment. That's actually their goal. They've come out and said it. We want higher unemployment to curb inflation, something that they already created by printing too much money.
Right.
So they're just trying to fix the problem they created by creating another problem, which is higher unemployment. And then they'll reverse course and start to bring down interest rates. So we do teach strategies where you could actually get HELOC rates and what we call promo rate stacking. So there's nothing stopping you from getting a 1.99% HELOC for a year, and it cannot change. And then since these HELOCs are virtually free, it doesn't cost anything. It's fractional cost compared to a mortgage. So a lot of these banks will pay all of your title closing and things of that nature too. So they're free loans to get, and nothing prevents you to go from 1.99 to another 1.99. I actually executed this successfully myself for 3 years. I had 1.99% on my home equity line of credit. So it is a little beneficial to have a lower rate, but if you're massively cash flow positive, it's negligible. Instead of paying your home off in 55 months, it could save you 5 months of paying it off. So for those that are still, because we've been ingrained as consumers, focus on interest rate, focus on interest rate, focus on interest rate. So if that's still you and you haven't overcome that yet mathematically, which I'll help you do on the next webinar, you can still stair step into this, and you can still get the benefit of both worlds. You can still get low rates and a first lien position home equity line of credit that can consume all of your assets.
What are some of the hurdles in this environment now? What are some of the bigger hurdles? Folks,
the hurdle there is, qualifying for a HELOC has become more challenging, because think about it from a bank's perspective. They can't qualify you based on that teaser rate of 1.99 because they're going to assume that you're going to continue to keep that HELOC, and it's going to now adjust to a variable rate. So let's say a year from now, that 1.99 could quickly turn into a 6% interest rate, right? So they're not going to underwrite your loan based on you paying a 1.99%. They're going to have to make the assumption that you're going to be paying 6, 7, or 8% interest, right? So debt ratio is what an underwriter will take a look at to not only credit score, but debt ratio is a big factor in how you qualify. So can you afford that new minimum payment down the road? So as interest rates have increased, we have seen more and more clients not qualify because of the higher interest rates, that the underwriters have to do what's called a stress test. They have to assume that you will keep that HELOC. You're not going to do like I do, jump from one low rate to another low rate. Can you qualify on that 6, 7, or 8% interest rate? So that has been a hurdle. But there are ways to combat that. You know, let's say you've got a car loan that's $500 a month. I don't care if it's 0%. And again, we'll get into this in the webinar as well. If it's a 0% car loan at $500, well, if you pay that off with the home equity line of credit, for every $10,000 that you borrow on a home equity line of credit, it increases the minimum payment on that HELOC about $42 a month. So if you take $30,000 car loan, you're looking at $126 more a month on the home equity line of credit. But what you did is you eliminated the $500 car payment, right? So you've actually increased your cash flow positivity by another $374 per month, right? So that actually lowers your debt ratio. So there are strategic ways to pay off some installment debts that you may already have to lower your debt ratio to make it easier for you to qualify. And we help folks with that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I know your passion goes way beyond just even replacing your mortgage. Your broader focus is helping to build a parallel economy for patriots. Can you flesh that out a little bit for us? How is replacing your mortgage just the first step for people to begin really building their own parallel economy?
Yeah, it's all a mindset shift. Ironically, that today I've got Nate Bailey in the office, and Nate Bailey's part of the team as well. He heads up Replace Your Mindset. It's funny because we got his buckles right out here on the table. He has buckles where I think there's 6 or 7 of them where he runs 100+ mile races. He's ran the Denali 135. He's written a book called The 100-Mile Mindset. He's done SEALFIT Kakor, which is a 52-hour crucible. How does the average person get off the couch and at 45 years old start to compete in 100-mile, 135-mile races or 52-hour physical endurance tests? It's a mindset shift. And that's essentially what Replace Your Mortgage is look, you've been force-fed this information from high school to college to, being an employee, that this is how you're supposed to consume products that we create, right? And who's doing the education is the banks. So they're basically educating you to consume the products that they want you to consume that make them the most profits. So Replace Your Mortgage is a mindset shift, but initially Replace Your Mortgage is just how to control that debt. Now that you take full control of your debt, and how can you more efficiently get that paid off versus the average American. And then once you do, you realize you've got access to capital that you didn't otherwise have. So now you got seed capital. So let's say you've always had a passion to do something else, but you didn't have the capital to do it. Well, a lot of our clients will wake up, 3 years down the road into our program, like, wow, now I've got a couple $100,000 of equity that I didn't otherwise have access to. What can I do with it? Because equity sitting in your home is actually a depreciating asset. Your home may appreciate, but the cash is sitting in there, not even at 0%. It's actually sitting in there at the cost of inflation. So your money is going backwards. Good rule of thumb. Right. You got $300,000. You put it in a tin can, bury it in your backyard. You dig up that tin can 30 years from now. Do you know what the value of that tin can is? This will surprise you. 122 grand. Oh, because of inflation, right? The devalue of the dollar. Yeah. So there's no different with your equity. So how can we wake up that sleeping equity and put it into use to start creating a side hustle, something that is of passion, so you can earn additional revenue? Well, when you earn additional revenue, what happens to the strategy? You actually speed up the process. You may even speed up the process so much that you do what our next step is called Replace Your Employer. So you could turn that sleeping equity into real estate investments. We also have Replace Your Dollar, where right now, I shouldn't be leaking this, but me, I will anyways. We're beta testing something on Replace Your Dollar where we're getting about 2% return on our investments per day. So we're doubling our money every 2 months. And it's exciting times around here for sure. 6 months from now, things may look a lot different. My office will probably look a lot different. But you have to open your mind to these alternatives. You don't have to just lay around and be a victim to the economy. You don't have to lay around and be a victim to inflation or the politicians. You can create your own economy. You can become resistant to inflation. And in fact, you create your own economy that you start creating you soak up the Twitter employees, you soak up all these other people getting laid off and the talent that is out there. So you just don't have to lay around and be a victim.
Awesome. Oh, I love it. So yeah, why don't you give us a little bit of a sneak peek? You're doing a webinar. Yep. It's going to be an in-depth topic on this kind of, or in-depth dive on these topics. People can just click on the link below to sign up. Can you give us a little bit of a sense of what you're going to cover?
Yes, I'm going to take it from a very basic level. When I get into the math, don't be concerned that this is going to be so nerdy that you got to be a calculus or algebra expert in order to understand this. This is 3rd grade math. It's very easy math. So I'm going to take it from what the average American makes versus what the average expenses are. And we're going to show you mathematically what it looks like with a first lien position home equity line of credit. If you were to transition everything you have, instead of having a checking and savings account, you've got this home equity line of credit that is not only your real estate loan, but it is also your depository account. So you deposit all of your resources in there. And I'm going to break down the math of why this works. Now, I say why this works. That is the key. You have to be cash flow positive. So is it going to work for everybody? Absolutely not. So you have to be cash flow positive, meaning you have to have already mastered your budget. If you're currently somebody's living paycheck to paycheck, you got some homework to do. You got to take a look at your budget, look at your expenses, and look at your income. Either make more money or spend less money. I'm not a huge fan of spending less money. Sometimes there's unnecessary expenses in there, but we still have to live life. And in this day and age, with all the opportunities that we have and the technology that we have at our fingertips, I think it's a lot easier to go out and make an extra $1,000 a month than it is to reduce your expenses by $1,000 a month.
Right. Absolutely.
So I will go through step by step mathematically why this makes sense and why you should be looking at an alternative to financing all of your real estate.
This is going to be great, gang. I'll be there, gang. You got to get me. This is so cool. You'll love, I've sat in on Michael's teaching before. He's excellent. Make sure to click that link below. Sign up for a completely free webinar where Michael's going to show you how you can pay off your mortgage 5 to 7 years and weather this recession. Again, you're not just going to survive it. You're going to thrive in it. It's absolutely awesome. So make sure to click on that link below. Sign up for it today. Again, I'll be there and we'll be learning together. Sir Michael, thank you once again for being back and sharing your patriot wisdom. I look forward to the webinar. Look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks in person as well.
Thanks again, Steve. Take care.
You bet. God bless, man.